I'm Senterfitt, the Director of Investigations for the Sheriff's Office. And I wanted to come and talk a little bit about the case that we brought to you yesterday involving the missing person that we have, McCoy. And I'll run through it again a little bit. I know you got most of this last night, but I also know that we've gotten some questions and some things about the investigation itself, the way it was conducted, some of the timelines. So I'm hoping that by having an opportunity to talk to you, we can clear some of that up for you. As we talked about last night, and I'll go through this kind of chronologically, and hopefully it'll make sense, because I know it's a little confusing. But on January 10th, police responded to a call of an abduction. They went to a scene where there was a man there, Mr. Hay, that had called the police. And in fact, when they got there, Mr. Hay was on the phone with the dispatcher saying that he was pursuing the vehicle that he saw pull this lady that we now believe to be Michelle McCoy inside this van. The police officers were having some trouble locating him because it's basically a little pursuit through the neighborhoods. And so the police are saying, well, we don't know where he is. You know, he needs to stop so we can find him. Eventually, the complainant in this case lost sight of the van and lost the van. So he returned back to the area where he called the initial reporting from, and that's where he met up with the police. He gave them that information. Those officers wrote what we call an information report, saying that this is what this person said that happened, and they routed that information report to come to appropriate units here with the Sheriff's Office, which were homicide and missing persons. Those are read out on the reading files of those units. There wasn't an awful lot of information in there to be followed up. We didn't know who this person was. We didn't know where they went. We didn't know anything other than he saw somebody being dragged into a van and he lost them in that area. On January 13th, there was a missing persons report that was submitted through Michelle McCoy's sister. On that report, she indicated that her sister left with somebody that she referred to as KT, but told her she was a little concerned about that and to call me in 10 minutes or so. Her sister tried to call her later and didn't get her. So that happened on the 10th. That's when she saw her. On the 13th, after 3 days, she decided to do the missing persons report. So she gave us a missing persons report, told us that her sister hadn't come home and she was concerned about her, but it was an adult that hadn't come home, and that report was written as a no foul play suspected. They just didn't know where she was. She just didn't return home. A no foul play suspected missing persons report is a category of offense here where patrol has the initial 10 days follow-up on that, and then the detective division gets it after 10 days. In this case, a detective actually got this on the 19th, which would be 6 days later, because she was just caught up in her work and she was able to get ahead of some of the cases that she had. So on the 19th, it was assigned to Detective Alvers and Missing Persons, who began to work the case, contact the family, try to find out what leads there might be to follow up on, and try to develop where we might be able to go from there. The family on their own during this time they were putting out flyers looking for their missing sister. The original complainant, Mr. Hay, saw one of those flyers on the 25th and called the number that was on there, which was the number here to Missing Persons for Detective Alvers, and said, that's the person that I saw being taken into that van. So that's when the connection was made that these two people might be the same, and then through some follow-up, we believe that it is the same. And then we had some leads based on that, some phone numbers, some other things that we were working on that we worked on the 25th to 26th, and then yesterday on the 27th, we were getting to a point where we had done kind of what we could do. And so we asked for the media's help to try to get this information out to see if we could get any more information on this case. So that's the timeline, and that's what's happened, and we're still working it. Unfortunately, we still haven't located her. After the news reports last night, we have received a few more tips today. We hope to continue to get tips. I know there are some concerns, or at least some questions in people's minds about, you know, this abduction report that was reported on the 10th, and then it being basically the 25th before we were able to figure out that that was the same person that was reported missing on the 13th. And as the director of all investigations in this department, I can tell you that I have some concerns too. I had these concerns when they were brought to me on the 25th. I shared those with the sheriff, and we were already working on looking into whether anything's done wrong on that, and that's an ongoing process right now. We didn't really talk about that yesterday because the focus then, as the focus now, is on finding Michelle McCoy. Whether or not anybody, you know, didn't do something they should have done on this investigation will come out. It's being handled outside of the investigative part of this, and so we're really concerned about finding this young lady. That's our real focus here. I don't know if anybody did anything wrong. I'll tell you that the only thing that would have made those two reports similar was that there was a black female involved. Because there wasn't a lot of a lot of descriptive information in the first report. And it was 6 days, or actually 9 days later before the detective got that case to try to match it up. And we get an awful lot of those kinds of reports in, a lot of information reports that they read. So we're looking at whether or not patrol handled that right in the beginning. We're looking at whether or not our detectives handled it right when they got it. And you know, really that's about all I can say about that, because with any internal investigation that we do, they're confidential until they're complete. But that's separate and outside of what we're doing. But I know there were some questions, because it's a little bit of a confusing timeline. It's stretched out for a while, and I know a lot of people are kind of wondering, well, why did it take this long to do that? You know, it didn't take us 2 weeks to come ask for some help, but it took us a couple of days because we didn't know about it until then. And we're looking into whether we should have known that or not ahead of time. So, you know, that's a little rambling probably for you, but I want to try to give you some feel for how this all happened and what we've been doing. And we've been on top of on the 19th, there was a detective trying to find this lady and talking with the family. On the 25th, we figured out that we believe this is the same person and probably was abducted. I will tell you that, and I don't know, it was a little confusing to me, but it sounded like the abduction took place in that parking lot out there, and I guess technically it did, but actually Michelle McCoy left her house in that vehicle. Her sister saw her get in the vehicle but didn't know who with, and then later Mr. Hayes saw her being dragged into that vehicle in that parking lot. So it's just speculation at this point. It would be just speculating at this point to try to say how did they get to there and why was she trying to get out at that point. But we believe that the same van probably that picked her up at her house, because 10 minutes later, or 11 minutes later, so her sister said she talked to her at 7 o'clock p.m. and at 7:11, Mr. Hay was calling in this abduction, you know, just a little ways from her house. So, you know, she left her house with these people. So we're hoping that people watching this will have some idea who that is that she was with and be able to get us some information. So hopefully I've covered most of it, but I'll be happy to try to answer some questions if you've got them.
On the night of January 10th, there was some evidence, according to the witness, that was taken. Should your officers have done more than file an information report when there was an abduction alleged and eyewitnessed by someone? Where did the officers drop the ball?
Well, what I'll say is I got to wait and because I've heard some of that too through our interviews with this witness, but I haven't talked to any of the officers involved. I don't know, and until we can get kind of all the sides of this, I really can't speak to it. Now, if there was evidence there at the scene, officers should collect it. You know, whether or not they should have written that as an abduction or not, I've got to wait until we do some investigating and find out. So it's just a little hard for me to say at this point.
We're told it was her shoe.
Yes. I know that there was a shoe involved that I think maybe was identified as hers later. But if they'd have taken that shoe that night, it would have gone into the property room. I mean, we didn't know where to compare it that night because she wasn't reported for 3 days after that.
If you guys, or your detective got the report on the 19th,
yes, and
then this man came forward on the 25th, what took so long to connect the dots?
Well, we're looking at that, but it's you know, there aren't a lot of dots, quite honestly. And now, I'm not sure that they shouldn't have connected the dots, but there's a report written on the 10th that you've all seen that's a fairly short narrative that just says, I saw this, you know, black female being dragged into this van, struggling, fighting, driving off. And then 9 days later, she's got a missing person report of somebody where they don't suspect foul play, where she left home with somebody that she knew and she hasn't turned up. You know, a lot of times it's pretty easy to look back and say maybe you should have connected those dots. It's maybe not so easy while it's happening. Now, maybe they should have, but that's along with the question he asked. We're investigating that to see.
Did a supervisor respond to the scene on the 10th?
I don't believe a supervisor responded to the scene there, which would be normal if they didn't write it as an abduction, but a supervisor did approve that report.
But the police report did say abduction on it. It said kidnapping, actually. So why wouldn't a supervisor show up when it says kidnapping?
I believe the offense was written as information. Now, in the narrative, they may have written that someone told them there was an abduction, because you write what they tell you. But the report was written as an information report, which would indicate the officers weren't sure that they had all the elements of the crime that they had there. That's what we're looking into, whether they should have or not. And I can't really answer that. But if you look at the front of that report, where it says offense type, it says information. And on that type of report, that would indicate that the officers didn't completely feel like they had all the elements to meet an abduction at that point. We're looking into whether or not that's the case and whether that should be the case.
At what point did JSO suspect foul play in this case? Was it once the man
It was honestly after Mr. Hay came forward and we put these two together, because until that point, missing persons detectives were still working this as a young lady that left home with someone that she knew, and we hadn't heard from her yet.
Do you have any persons of interest right now? Have you talked to anybody?
We've talked to people. I'm not sure I'd classify anybody as a person of interest. We've been able to, through talking with the family and all, talk to some people that they tell us we should talk to. That's probably a fair way to put it. We don't have a suspect or anything at this point, but we're continuing to talk to people, and we're also working on some evidence that's out there, and there's some evidence that's out there that we have to wait for, and I'm not going to get into the investigation, but we're still doing some
So
things.
is there an internal investigation into, or an
Yes.
investigation into,
Yes.
talk to me about what's.
I really can't, as I just told you. Internal investigations by law are confidential until they're complete. And I really am not supposed to tell you that they're even going on, but there will be an internal investigation as to whether this was done.
What do you say to this family? Their daughters were missing for 18 days. They called, this man walked around for 15 days with her shoe in his car. What do you say to the family who's out there saying, well, where's my daughter?
Well, we've already been talking to the family. We've been talking to them regularly since the 19th. You know, we've got, you know, I really can't answer what happened out there at that time until those officers get talked to. I mean,
All right,
I
guys,
just
last
can't.
question, then we're gonna conclude
If
this.
you've got
Did you
something
also
on this,
collect rope? Did he give you rope as well besides the shoe?
Yes, I had to ask. I don't know. You know, obviously, I'm the director. I'm not as far into the weeds of the investigation itself.
Any new leads? What are you guys doing now?
The things that we do have, I really can't tell you about because they're things that we're working. But again, you know, and I just want to reiterate, officers in this case may have done something wrong. They may not have. I don't know yet until we look into it. And nobody should say one way or the other until we do. But the focus here should be on finding Michelle McCoy. We will do the investigation into, and none of that is very time sensitive, quite honestly. We will get that investigation done as to whether officers did anything wrong. What's time sensitive is getting you guys helping us get the word out, us getting tips in, and trying to locate this young lady.
Why are such significant portions of the reports, these 2 reports you released yesterday, why are they redacted?
The things that would have been redacted out of your report yesterday would be things that were investigative in nature that we're working on, and that we would rather people in the general public not know that we know. And some of that, you know, as it goes along, we'll be able to release more of it. But for investigative purposes, we keep some of that stuff
Do
back.
you believe she's alive?
I really don't have any idea. I mean, there's nothing to indicate that she's not, but it's been a long time. So, I mean, we don't have anybody saying that she's not. We don't have anything to base any beliefs on that she's not. So we're proceeding as if she's still alive, and we just need to find her. Okay?
All right, thank you, Director.
Thanks.